This is section 2.2. We're going to be talking about slope and rate of change, which is actually the same thing, just a different name for the same thing. And your homework for this section is 17 through 35 in the homework packet. All right, let's talk about slope. Slope is the ratio meaning fraction, of the vertical change of a line to the horizontal change of a line. That's definition, math terms. Blah. So let's go on with how we actually use this. If you have 2 points, we've got point 1 and point 2, the formula for calculating the slope is we subtract the y's and we subtract the x's, and the y's go on top. Now, one thing you do have to be careful of is that this x and this y come from the same point. This x and this y come from the same point. Other than that, it doesn't matter which one is point 1, which one is point 2, but these two have to match and these two have to match. They have to come from the same point. Another way of saying slope is rise over run. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before, rise over run. The letter we use to indicate slope is M. So let's suppose I have a point -5, 7 and 4, -1, and I want to calculate the slope. So I'm going to take the y values and subtract them. I'm going to take the x values and subtract them, put the y's on top. So I'm going to take 7, which is a y value, subtract a -1. Make sure if this is negative, you have the subtract and you also have the negative. One does not take care of the other. So you're subtracting a -1. Now, since I put the 7 first on top, I have to put the -5 first on the bottom. So I have -5, subtract 4 on the bottom. Well, if you're subtracting a negative, it's the same thing as adding a positive. 7 plus 1 is 8. And on the bottom, -5 subtract 4 gives me a -9. Now the thing with negative and a fraction, you can either put the negative on the bottom, you can put the negative on the top, or you can put the negative out front. It's all the same thing. It doesn't matter. You do not, however, get to use the negative twice. If I have 8 over -9, it is not the same thing as -8 over -9. So be careful with that. Example 1. The first x value is -1. The second x value is 5. The first y value is 3. And the second y value is -4. So the formula says subtract the y's, subtract the x's, put the y's on top. So I'm going to take my second y value. And by the way, guys, this is not an exponent here. That is what we call a subscript, which just says we've got 2 different y's that we're talking about. This is the first one, and this is the second one. That's all that means. It's not the same thing as power. I don't have to square that number. So I'm looking for, erased too much here. So -1, 5, 3, -4. Okay, so I need my second y value, which is -4, and I have to subtract my first y value, which is 3. And now I have to take my second x value, which is 5, and subtract the first x value, which is -1. I do need this subtract. I do need this negative. Okay. So I subtract a negative. It's the same thing as adding a positive. On the top, I have -4 subtract 3 is -7. And on the bottom, 5 plus 1 is 6. The slope is -7 over 6. Have you tried this one by yourself? All right, use the coordinates on the indicated points to find the ratio of rise to run for the line. What does that mean? It means find the slope. You can do this a couple different ways. You can actually figure out what points these are and then use the formula. So this would be what? An x value of 2, a y value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, -6, and this has an x value of -1 and a y value of 3. All right, there you go. So you can use a formula to calculate the slope. Faster way to find the slope, if we have a graph, is to do rise over run. Rise is how many we go up, and run is how many we go to the right. If we go down, you got to put a negative. If we go to the left, you got to put a negative. So rise over run. So it doesn't matter which point you start at, as long as you're consistent. So let's start at that point right there. And I want to know how many I go up as I go from this point to that point. Okay, how many am I going up? Well, in fact, I'm going down. So that tells me I have to go negative. All right, so how many am I going down then? So here I am right here. And I have to go to this. That's how many I'm going between up and down. So let's count them. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going down 9 places. Going down 9 places. Now how many am I going to the right? Well, that's going between here and here. So here's my point. Here's my point. How many am I going to the right? Well, 1, 2, I'm going 3 over to the right. And you do reduce that. Negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. Slope is negative 3. Let's take a look at this one. If you have the graph, it's easier to do rise over run. So let's start at this point this time. Doesn't matter. So I'm going from here and I'm going up to there. So how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going up 8 places. Now the question is, how many am I going to the right if I start here and I go to here? How many am I going to the right? Well, I'm not going to the right at all. So that's 0. Be careful with 0. If 0 is in the denominator, what that says is divide by 0. And you guys know you cannot divide by 0. The slope is undefined because I have a 0 in the denominator. That's not the same thing as 0 in the numerator. Suppose I have a fraction that's 0 over, I don't know, 93. Whatever. If I have a 0 in the top, that's not the same thing as 0 in the bottom. 0 in the top is actually equal to 0. 0. Okay? So, I realize this is not the same problem, but I wanted to make sure you understand the difference between 0 on the bottom and 0 on the top. 0 on the bottom is not allowed. That's undefined. 0 on the top is, and you get 0. So let's take a look at this. Let's find the slope of this line. I want to know how many I'm going up as I go from this point to this point. And in fact, I'm not going up any. And how many am I going to the right? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going 8 to the right. 0 on top is 0. So for this line, the slope is 0. Now I want you to pay particular attention to these two lines. Anytime you have a vertical line, it doesn't matter where the line is. Anytime that line is vertical, the slope is going to be undefined. If you have a horizontal line, doesn't matter where the line is. If you have a horizontal line, the slope is going to be 0. All right, example 6, the question is the slope positive, negative, 0, or undefined? Well, we know it's not 0 or undefined because it's not horizontal or vertical, but is the slope going to be a positive number or is the slope going to be a negative number? You can do this in a couple different ways. One way is to actually calculate the slope, figure out what this point is, figure out what this point is, do rise over run, whatever, and tell me whether or not that slope is a positive number or a negative number. Easier way to do it, or faster way to do it, is tell me what is happening on the right side of that graph. What are we doing as we go to the right? Well, that line is going up on the right-hand side, and you know that going up is positive. So this has a positive slope. Doesn't matter what kind of line we have, as long as it's going up on the right-hand side, the slope is going to be positive. This one is a vertical line, and what did I say about vertical lines? Vertical lines always have undefined slope. Example 8, notice we're going down on the right-hand side. We don't care what's going on the left. We don't care about that. What's happening as we go to the right? Well, you know, guys know down is negative, so this actually has a negative slope. And again, you can actually calculate the slope if you wish, but what I'm looking for is that slope going to be a positive number or a negative number? Okay, rate of change. Another way of saying slope is rate of change. Usually we say rate of change when we have a word problem. So the question is, find the rate of change in dollars per hour. This tells you what we want on top. Per hour tells you what we want on the bottom. So the dollars have to go on the top and the hours have to go on the bottom. If an employee makes makes $24 in 4 hours and $120 in 20 hours, dollars have to go on top. So I take the second one, subtract the first one. That's the dollars, has to go on the top. 120, subtract the 24. You get 96. Then for the hours, again, I have to take if I started with the second time the first time around, I got to start with the second one the second time around. So 20 hours, because these two have to match. 20 hours, subtract 4 hours, gives you 16 hours. That does have to be reduced. So check to see if 16 goes into 96 evenly. In fact, it does. 6 times. So that is $6 for every, it should be 1 hour. Right, example 9. To build according to the Americans with Disabilities Act wheelchair ramp specifications, the least possible slope should be used for any ramp. The maximum slope of a ramp in new construction should be 1 foot rise for every 12 feet in horizontal distance. Horizontal distance is the run part of it. Find the grade. Well, the grade is another name for slope. Grade is another name for slope, but grade is written as a percent. So we have to take this 1 foot over 12 feet, and we have to figure out what that is as a percent. So you guys know if you have to convert a fraction to a percent, first thing you have to do is convert it to a decimal. And you do that by taking the top number divided by the bottom number. So we take 1 and divide it by 12, and that gives us 0.083 repeating. So we want that as a percent. Well, if you recall, writing a decimal as a percent, we move the decimal place 2 places. So that becomes 8.3. It's actually 3 repeating, but don't worry about that. 8.3%. So the grade for this problem would be 8.3%. These are CCSD questions, and there we go. All right, so that was section 2.2.